plain old black thing. All right, I get the plain old black thing. Hi, welcome. I'm Robert McBride of All Classical Portland. Over there is the guy you recognize, Carlos Kalmar.
Hey. Good evening.
Merely the music director of the Oregon Symphony. And this is Gabriela Lena Frank, a composer whose music is featured at the top of the show. And who I met moments ago backstage. When did you arrive in Portland?
I actually got here two days ago. I drove up from the San Francisco Bay Area for a nice little vacation, and I get to hear some of my music. I was just saying. I got here 2 days ago. I'm driving up from the San Francisco Bay Area where I reside, and so it's been really beautiful to experience the naturaleza. And I love Portland. I was here 1 year ago for the first time, working with the Third Angle Ensemble, and many of the members of the Third Angle are also members here, so there's been a nice connection between the two.
So, did you get to take part in some rehearsals?
No, this is going to be completamente nuevo for me. It's going to be completely new.
That's unusual that you would make the, or is it unusual that you would make the trip and not have that opportunity?
You know what? If you are a composer, you must get used to the idea of not being there to help in the preparation of the music.
Well, especially if you're a dead composer, that
exactly,
pretty much.
Exactly. But even when you're a living composer, even when you're living, does your music stand on its own merits? Do you need to be there to explain, is it rich for interpretation by somebody like Carlos and the Oregon Symphony?
Yeah. Well, I know that Carlos likes working with living composers at least as much as he likes working with dead ones. Is your microphone working? Do you know? Let's try it. Is your mic working? Let's try it. No? All right. So
Sorry, we will switch. That's okay.
That's fine.
Actually, the fun part of, there are so many things. Uh-oh. Look at that. Can I have that? No, don't. It's probably a battery not working. Okay. Now, the thing is that we prepared this. Oh, this is an entire story that Gabriela doesn't even know. So we prepared this entire piece. And since it's a piece that is really, really well written, there is not like, what does the composer mean? None of that. You will enjoy this piece. Nonetheless, in the first movement, there is a dance, which is called a joropo. A joropo, actually, she's way better in these things than I am, so we are going to get into a discussion over this. A joropo actually comes from Venezuela, not so much from Peru. And we have a Venezuelan in, oh no, yeah.
Oh, no.
So Inés, our Venezuelan violinist, after we rehearsed, came to me. Try it.
That is what.
Oh yeah, she came to me in the rehearsal and said, "This is great, but joropo is just not as fast as this." So in essence, that's, I would dare to say, the only freedom that I take in this piece, that the middle section of the first movement, I take it a little bit slower than probably usual. Because also, Gabi, she wrote, there's a huge energy in the first movement. Fantastic, will blow you away. And then she not only writes, this is a joropo in the middle, she writes, this is a joropo gordo. Joropo gordo means this is a fat joropo. Meaning, in terms of dance, is probably somebody who is like a little more settled. So that's kind of my excuse. She can beat me up later.
I think one of the wonderful things about something like a piece of music is that it's an area where people can meet and discuss. And I have learned so much more if I could set my ego aside and realize that I don't know all the answers, even if something has come through me. And as I've gotten more advanced or attained more mastery, more confidence as a composer, supposedly I know more what I want, I'm more able to let go at the same time. And when I give especially intelligent performers permission to take the music somewhere else within reason, then actually the music is the greatest compliment you can give a composer, that the music exists even beyond our imagination. I think it's a little bit like having a kid. When the kid is about 3 or 4 and they're sitting at the table and they start having their own opinion about things. And you're thinking, what do you mean you think that? and because you realize you don't own this beautiful personality that's coming forth. Also, keep in mind, this piece is a young piece for me. It's only my second orchestra piece, the first being my thesis that I graduated from school on. And in the 10 years since, I've heard a lot of different types of joropos. At that time, I hadn't traveled in Venezuela yet very much. And when you look at Bartok, who's one of my heroes, he became more sophisticated in knowing about styles. He writes about this, that different styles from different parts of the Hungarian countryside. He didn't own it all at one point. 10 years later, he knew more. So it's really important to have this kind of discussion. Sometimes you feel more freedom, I would imagine, when the composer's not there at the rehearsals, that you can either just knock it into shape. You don't have to sound perfect right away. You can have discussions. Let's not do everything the composer wrote, but we'll do the spirit of the joropo and in a different way than what she might have imagined.
Well, the thing is, of course, in this piece that captures, let's say, 3 different flares, smells of very different parts of South America. Gabriela is from Peru, kind of.
Kind of. My mother is Peruvian. I was born in the exotic land of Berkeley, California.
It's pretty exotic by some people's standards, actually.
But from what I read, of course I read about you and this piece. That's why you already mentioned Bela Bartok. She's one of those composers who, amongst other things, is very interested in what people actually in the countryside are about, musically speaking. So she probably has been traveling in many places in South America and just gathering old people singing to her and then incorporating that somewhat in her writing on occasion. This is one of, I'm sure you write a lot of different things, but this is one piece that actually captures. And in the sense of Latin American dances, I would dare to say what you can expect is 2 dances and an atmospheric piece, because the second movement is it's not really a dance. So the first movement, high energy, wonderful, has something to do with, in part, with people from the Amazonas, which is Brazil, and then travels towards what we already called the joropo, which is Venezuelan. And the last movement, where is the last movement? Because the last movement, I yesterday did an introduction. We were in Salem, and I said, at the beginning of the last movement, you think you're actually in Mexico.
I know.
But it's not.
No, it's a romancero style. It's a natural style that actually doesn't sound like Mexican music until you put trumpets in it. If you score it for a different instrument, it sounds Peruvian. And I didn't realize it sounded like Mexican music until I heard it with trumpets. This movement actually exists originally for just string quartet. And I had 4 players, and I had to leave out a lot of things. There's a very rich percussion sound for the last movement, which I obviously don't use. And you play it in Peru, and they're like, claro, romanceros, it's coastal style. But then I heard it for the first time with these trumpets, and I think I even put mariachi vibrato as an instructor in there. So what did I expect? I mean, the good players, they play it, and it sounds bien mexicano.
Well, that piece, actually that's the shortest of the 3 movements. And in the middle, there is a slow movement that actually is more like, works, I would say, like a painting. No?
I think that's very beautiful. It's more still. It gives you time as if you're looking at the music. It's not unfolding and getting away from you, as if you have time to see it unfold in front of you. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's very, well, maybe to say perfumed is the wrong terminology, but it is, for me, that's why I thought about a painting, because I thought it reflects something on the very solitary landscapes where there is not much, and there is maybe a little bit of weather and a little bit, maybe you hear a little indigenous drum very far in the distance, and then the old indio starts to play. And the nature answers as an echo. It's actually, it's in a way that's my favorite movement because it has such a distinctive, evocative color. And then in the middle, okay, it takes off. In the middle, it goes very fast, and then it goes back. But, brilliant writing, and so well instrumentated.
Carlos, I'm curious, is this the first music, these three dances, the first music you've performed by Gabriela?
Yes, yes.
This is right up your alley. Being from South America, you're just totally into this.
That is what you think. But I must say that, in essence, Gabi said, yes, she's Peruvian, but she's from Berkeley, California. I'm actually I actually was really born in South America, but I have no South American heritage whatsoever. In my veins is 100% blood from Vienna in Austria.
That's why they call that waltz Vienna blood, huh?
Yeah. Exactly. I wrote that.
Ah.
Okay.
Well, this is really delightful having a composer here. And I'm really happy that you're giving about 17 minutes of this program to this living composer and that she's here with us tonight. This is good.
Well, I think that you all who come regularly to our symphony concerts, you already know that on occasion we will present a living composer here, mostly at the start of the performance, and it will always leave everybody stunned. Because in the sense of, I had this experience because it's very varied what young or even not so young composers write these days, and many of them have a real voice. And my experience here with the Oregon Symphony and you as our audience members is the reaction was always positive. I know this for a fact that the reaction will be very positive tonight. The only difference from tonight, from your piece to maybe others that we played here for living composers, it will be a positive reaction with a smile. You are going, yeah, because it makes you smile. At least, I'm not telling you what to do, but yesterday at the end of the first movement, and it made me very happy, I heard chuckles. How the first movement ends, because it's very witty. And by the way, just so to mention it, if you, at the first 4 bars of this piece, if you think, wait a second, that's West Side Story, it's intended.
It was absolutely intended. This piece was they talk about the proverbial lucky break that musicians get, and this piece provided me with that. I had an opportunity to have an orchestra piece not only performed, but recorded alongside Rachmaninoff's symphonic dances and West Side Story. So no pressure, and I wanted to be able to pay tribute to that. So it seemed like a fitting tribute to paraphrase. It's not an exact quote, but it's very recognizable that it comes from Bernstein.
Fun. How did you get started writing music? When did you get started writing music?
Well, some people say you're not composing until you write it down on paper, and that if you merely sing a tune in a shower, even if it's yours, you're not composing. And I began quite early, but I didn't write anything down. And on the Lithuanian Jewish side of my father's side of the family, there's a musical gene for extemporizing, improvising, perfect pitch. We were all pianists, but nobody became a professional, so we didn't take it seriously. It's almost like recognizing a physical trait in Uncle Bob, and now so-and-so has it, and it skipped a generation. My grandmother, Lucy Frank, had it, skipped my father and his brother, and came to me, her little Latina granddaughter, and there are pictures of us sitting at my old spinet in Berkeley, California, and she's playing Gershwin and other sheet music that she loved growing up in New Rochelle and in the Bronx in New York. And I'm playing tunes that I heard from my mom's concert. Not my mom's concert, but concert that we would go to with my mom of Andean musicians that were coming to the Bay Area from Bolivia, from Peru, from Ecuador during the 70s and 80s. And so during this time, there was a lot of turmoil in Latin America. And so you were hearing a lot about this part of the world. Now our attention is elsewhere. But I was exposed to folkloric music of Peru, albeit in California. So alongside my classical music training with my neighborhood teacher from South Africa, this is very Berkeley, I would get Bartok and music from countries that don't exist anymore, Yugoslavia, Lithuania, and then I would have my folkloric concerts, and I would come home and try and replicate the things that I saw in the Peruvian musicians at the piano. So if I saw the charango guitar, which is like our Andean ukulele, doing this, I would go to the piano and do this to Beethoven. And I would try and Latinize Bach, and I would add extra endings, because we Latinos, we like a lot of endings. And so I was composing already, and when I started doing this in school, Bartok was a big hero for me. Later I studied with the composer William Bolcom, who is known for resurrecting interest in Scott Joplin, ragtime in the 60s. And he incorporated cabaret, turn-of-the-century American song into classical. So in terms of getting started now, you're asking, how do I get started composing? I don't really get writer's block. I have the opposite problem. I have too many ideas, and I'm trying to focus on one, and something sparkly comes over here, so I've learned a shorthand to just jot down what it is, and I have a lot of music that's left over from pieces, a bit like cutting together a film. You may have outtakes with Robert De Niro or Brandon. They're improvising, just having a good time with the characters, and it's fabulous material, but doesn't fit in that movie. Imagine being able to recast that into another piece. So I save everything. I have about 60 or 70 binders of materials. And over the years, categories have emerged that make sense only to me. It could be brass music not Peruvian enough, question mark? And I mean, they just make sense to me. And so these are all ideas that have a lot of life in them. I put hours of work into it, and it's easy for me to get started. They're all homeless. And it would be hard for somebody to retrace the path back from the original genesis of an idea and what it actually looks like in the piece, because I disguised it over 10 years. My joropos now would be very different for having gone through all these binders of material. Other binders are from exercises that I do. So much like performers do scales and arpeggios, we composers can do the analogous. But we, like performers don't perform those scales and arpeggios, but they're ready to tackle the Chopin and the Beethoven with more ferocity than they could otherwise. So for us, for instance, composers are notoriously bad at transitions. We'll do something very beautiful, and clunk, and suddenly we're in this new section. So you can practice that, and it's fun. You may take something like 8 bars of Shostakovich string quartet. I'll give myself 20 minutes. I start my day, and I need to connect it to the most glorious Mahler. So how am I going to get from really spare Russian Shostakovich and open up to something that's panoramic and vista-like, a bit like the Highland Atawi, large? Because I can guarantee you that situation is going to come up at some point, and maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and I will save those little exercises and sometimes later even build a piece. So it makes composing fun. And the element of fun and gameplay and experimentation is necessary no matter what discipline you're in.
I believe that you just heard something that is very important in terms of how a composer not only thinks, but how a composer actually works. Because as difficult as it may be to actually, for Gabi, and there is an orchestra, there is a string quartet, whoever, and says, please, can you write a piece for me, which happens all the time probably, and you say, okay, I have time. As difficult as it may be to just sit down and conceptualize that, you have to do we instrumentalists, well, I'm a conductor, so I'm an exception, but instrumentalists do scales, just to keep kind of the trade up. A composer, what she just said is, that was her scales, meaning just the day-to-day, every morning you get up and play. There are so many musicians, pianists, who get up in the morning and play a preludium and fugue by Bach, because it gets the mind going, it gets the fingers going. Okay, she sits down and writes a transition between Shostakovich and Mahler. That's interesting. In order to keep what she's doing up, and one day something might come up. I think that is very, very important for you to know. And of course, having the connection two composers from the past who are very different from each other is equally important. Now, if I can take just that idea and go to another piece that we're playing tonight, the Concierto de Aranjuez by Joaquín Rodrigo, that is, I would say, very doubtful that Joaquín Rodrigo, the great Spanish composer, did any of that. Joaquín Rodrigo is, I mean, you're going to hear this Concierto de Aranjuez, which probably you already have heard. That's his piece by quite a long shot. Rodrigo wrote maybe, I don't know, 150 pieces in his life. This is extremely well known. Then there is the Fantasía para un gentilhombre, which is kind of well known, and then there is the rest. The interesting point about Joaquín Rodrigo is that I would say, as opposed to Gabriela, he took music always, he was incredibly conservative in his musical language. I mean, harmonically speaking, there are probably composers who lived 100 years before Rodrigo who were more modern than Rodrigo actually is. But nonetheless, this guy, who, by the way, since the age of 3, was blind. This blind composer manages in the Concierto de Aranjuez to kind of unify everything that one could never imagine to be unified. First of all, Rodrigo was not a guitarist. You might think so, but he was not. He was a pianist. Second, so he writes for guitar, which is a kind of slightly neglected instrument in this setting of an orchestra. Second, he tries to capture the smell of a country. And third, he tries to maneuver all of that during a time in which the country was actually in disarray, because we are talking about 1939, Spanish Civil War. Francisco Franco was the dictator, and so the political setting was not such that they would accept any music that had anything kind of political innuendo or so. And so Rodrigo writes a concerto honoring a palace, I think it's south of Madrid, if I get it right, Aranjuez, the Palace of Aranjuez, and manages to write 3 movements that are astonishingly beautiful. Sometimes it happens, and in that sense, actually, because I said I love the movement that I prefer by Gabriela is the second, sometimes it happens that composers manage to write very simple music that is really good. The second movement of Gabi is, at least at the start, is fairly simple. It's, yeah. And Rodrigo writes a concerto that is so simple, but so evocative. And you will, of course, also, you are in for a treat, because Pablo Sáenz Villegas, you have, oh boy, that guy. He really rocks. Fantastic player. And last but not least, you have this very famous second movement in this concert with the equally famous English horn solo, which Rodrigo writes and keeps very silent about it, what it actually means, and whether there is a program. For years and years and years, and everybody was guessing, oh, he means this sadness and sadness about this, because it's a kind of sad music. And finally, probably decades later, Rodrigo reveals what the second movement is, what the inspiration is. It's not program music at all, but the inspiration was actually a miscarriage that his wife had, and that pretty much, well, was so hard to cope for both of them. And the great thing is that Pablo told me about that, our soloist, and he said, he indicated to me, this is kind of this music where you mourn, and sometimes you mourn in desperation, and at the end you accept what it is, and you make peace. And Pablo showed me at the very end of the movement, everything gets a little bit resolved, and there is, okay, life goes on. It's a beautiful moment. And then at the end, well, last movement, so much fun. like a little ballerina dancing in the clouds.
This concert will end with another piece of Spanish music, Navarra, flashy, fun way to end the concert. And in between, this moody Scottish symphony by Mendelssohn. How is that in here other than that it's music with a sense of place?
Well, actually, we wanted to do a concert with a sense of place. And to just explain this with kind of a little, I don't know whether with a joke, in terms of, you might argue that why on earth are we playing Navarra at the end? And the best I can come up with, aside from telling you, it's because it's good music, so fine. But the best I can is actually, come on, we are all here in Portland and surrounding areas. So, here in Portland, we are accustomed to eat well, right? We have phenomenal restaurants here in Portland. So you go to one of those hundreds of phenomenal restaurants and you have a salad and an appetizer and a main course and all of that. And then you're actually full. Like after the Scottish Symphony by Mendelssohn, you're full. And then this waiter with a big smile comes to your table and says, "Do you want to look at the dessert menu?" And you think, "Oh no." But you say, "Okay." And then you look and think, "I cannot eat more," but that is really interesting. So give me a little taste. That's why Navarra is there.
Great answer. Thank you. Wow, this is going to be a wonderful concert. You're in for a treat. Thank you for coming tonight to the pre-concert chat with composer Gabriela Lena Frank. And the guy in the yellow shirt, Carlos Kalmar.
And Robert McBride.
That was awesome.
Okay,